Imagine a man entering court not with remorse, but with a grin that said, "This doesn't apply to me." Providence District Court, routine docket, a school zone speeding citation. Yet the room thrummed with curiosity. Reporters at the back, phones lowered but ready, a tight braid of whispers running along the wooden pews. Fluorescents hummed. The air smelled faintly of wet coats and old varnish. On the bench, Judge Caprio sorted files with the calm of someone who has heard every excuse ever invented. The defendant, Andrew Marston, 52. Real estate magnate, polished to a shine, ash gray suit, crisp shirt, watch that could buy a hatchback. He moved as if the floor owed him firmness. When the clerk read the charge, he smiled, polite, practiced, dismissive. "Judge," he said, voice smooth as glass, "you're wasting my time. I'm happy to pay triple and be on my way." A small wave of "oh my" rippled through the gallery. Caprio's eyebrow rose a millimeter. He let the silence settle the way a surgeon lets instruments settle on a tray. "Today," the judge said, steady and cool, "you won't purchase time, Mr. Marston. In here, it belongs to the court." Marston laughed softly, as if indulging a quaint custom. "I'm too wealthy to worry about a few signs and traffic lights." Chairs creaked. Someone hissed, "Unbelievable." A camera shutter clicked and then was scolded into quiet. Caprio lifted a hand. The room stilled instantly. "Proceedings are paused," he announced. "Mr. Marston, sit." His tone wasn't loud, just immovable. "We're not discussing a fine yet." Marston settled, the smile thinning. The judge regarded him the way a lighthouse studies a storm, without hurry, without fear. "School zone," Caprio said, glancing at the citation. "Friday, 8:05 a.m. Marston shrugged, as if the minute hand belonged to him. The gallery leaned forward by instinct. Somewhere, a heating vent ticked like a metronome. Caprio folded his hands. "You think laws are subscription services. Cancel anytime. But there's a reason this room has no price tags." He paused, letting the words find their mark. "Here, we measure something money can't weigh." Marston's jaw tightened the width of a thread. He adjusted his cuff. The watch face flashed, an eye that never blinked. The judge set the file down and looked directly at him. "You came prepared to pay your way out," he said quietly, and discovered the one counter where cash is refused. The murmurs faded to a listening hush. The wood smelled older. The light felt colder. "Now," Caprio concluded, voice soft as a blade, "let's talk about why a man who has everything thinks he owes nothing. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel." "Mr. Marston," Judge Caprio said, his tone even, "tell me who you are. Not what you own, who you are." A flicker of amusement crossed Andrew's face. "I'm the owner of half this city, if you must know," he said, his smile returning like an expensive habit. "Half the city," Caprio repeated, nodding once, as though cataloging the answer rather than reacting to it. "And the other half, do you believe it exists for you, or beside you?" Andrew chuckled. "Judge, with all due respect, I built this place. My company put roofs over people's heads. I employ hundreds. I'm not the villain here." Caprio tilted his head, studying him. "Maybe not, but you do seem to believe your success puts you beyond certain boundaries." The businessman leaned back, unbothered. "I play by my own rules, Judge. That's what it takes to get anywhere in this world." The judge didn't argue. He let silence do its slow work. "Do you remember," Caprio asked finally, "the last time you lost something? Not money, but trust?" Andrew's jaw shifted slightly, the first sign of unease. "In business," he said, "trust is a story you tell investors. What matters is the bottom line." Caprio's lips curved, neither smile nor frown. "And that, Mr. Marston, is why you're sitting here." The officer in charge of the case rose and read from the report. "Vehicle clocked at 58 miles per hour in a 25 zone. Friday morning. School crossing active." Caprio glanced up. "That's when children walk to school, Mr. Marston." Andrew waved a dismissive hand. "And their parents drive cars too. Let's not pretend I'm a threat to society." A ripple of disbelief moved through the courtroom. Someone in the back whispered, "What a jerk," earning a quick glare from the bailiff. Caprio set his glasses on the bench. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "I have a grandson," he said. "He's 9. If your car had reached that crossing 10 seconds sooner, he might have been there. Tell me, what would you have said then?" That you're too rich to care? Andrew's confidence faltered for half a breath. That's not what happened. No, Caprio said, but it could have. The words landed with the dull weight of truth. For the first time, Andrew looked unsure, not guilty, but startled, like a man seeing a crack in a mirror he thought was unbreakable. Caprio leaned back slightly. You know, people like you fascinate me. You've spent a lifetime mistaking privilege for proof of worth. Every yes you've ever heard has turned into armor, and now you can't imagine a world where someone says no. Andrew crossed his arms. You think you can lecture me about the world? You sit here while people like me make it move. The judge's eyes didn't leave him. And yet, he said softly, here you are, stopped by a sign meant for children. The gallery held its breath. The sound of a pen rolling off the clerk's desk startled everyone. Caprio turned a page on the file. When the law reaches someone who believes he's beyond it, he said, that's when justice earns its name. Andrew's voice dropped to a mutter. You're enjoying this. No, Caprio replied. I'm listening. Because beneath all that certainty, there's something else, fear. The fear of being ordinary. The line hit its mark. Andrew didn't respond. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Here's what we'll do, Caprio said, closing the folder. I'm postponing judgment until I see whether this arrogance is a defense or a disease. He stood, signaling a recess. For now, consider this an opportunity you can't buy. The room didn't move until the judge was gone. Only then did the whispers begin again, low, uneasy, threaded with something like awe. Andrew Marston stayed seated, staring at the empty bench. For the first time in years, the man who owned half the city realized he didn't control the next minute of his own day. And that was when Judge Caprio noticed something no one else had, the faint scent of deceit in what should have been a simple speeding case. He motioned to the clerk. Bring me the original citation, he said. The paper was placed before him. Neat, official, but something about it didn't sit right. He examined the signature at the bottom, then raised his gaze to the officer standing nearby. Officer Daniels, is this your handwriting? The officer frowned. The report, yes, Your Honor. But that signature, I don't remember signing it like that. Caprio studied the curve of the ink again. Neither do I. It seems someone has a habit of tidying up other people's work. All eyes turned toward Andrew Marston. He adjusted his cufflinks, feigning calm. I only corrected a clerical error. My assistant said the form was incomplete. Your assistant? Caprio's tone sharpened. Mr. Marston, who exactly issued this ticket? You or the Providence Police Department? The businessman leaned back, smirking faintly. Judge, you're making too much of a detail. I have staff who handle these things. I sign hundreds of papers a day. What's one more? What's one more? Caprio repeated quietly. He lifted the document and tapped it with his finger. This, one more, is a legal instrument. Altering it is tampering with evidence. In my court, that's not a clerical mistake. It's contempt. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Someone whispered, he forged it. The sound of phones being silenced followed immediately after. Caprio waited until the noise died down. Tell me, Mr. Marston, he said evenly. When you pay someone to take responsibility for your actions, does that make you innocent or just well-funded? Andrew straightened, his voice crisp. My driver was at the wheel. He admitted it. It's in the record. Caprio flipped through the pages. Yes, I see that. A Mr. George Keller. Funny thing, though, this report was reassigned the next day. To you. The judge looked up. Who convinced him to change his statement? Andrew's jaw tensed. No one. He misunderstood. I corrected it. The words were brittle, defensive. So the story is, Caprio said, you weren't driving. Then you were. Then the officer's signature changed. And all of this happened conveniently between Friday morning and Monday afternoon? The courtroom buzzed again. Caprio lifted his hand. Silence fell instantly. You see, Mr. Marston, he continued, it's never the speeding that ruins powerful men. It's the paperwork. The arrogance that believes the rules were written in pencil just for them. Andrew's tone darkened. You're implying I committed fraud over a $200 ticket? I'm implying, Caprio said, voice suddenly like stone, that you've built a life where even guilt is delegated. A woman in the back row gasped. The businessman's composure cracked for the first time. His jaw twitched, eyes flickering toward the cameras at the rear of the room. Caprio leaned slightly forward. You came in here claiming to be too rich to worry. But tell me, how much does integrity cost on your balance sheet? No reply. Just the faint whir of the ceiling fan and the slow rhythm of breathing from 100 spectators who couldn't look away. After a long pause, Caprio closed the file and spoke quietly. This court will recess until I can confirm who, in fact, was behind that wheel. Because what I'm seeing isn't just a traffic violation, it's a symptom. Andrew lifted his chin, trying to recover his footing. You have no right to judge my principles. Caprio met his stare, calm and immovable. Oh, but that's precisely why you're here, Mr. Marston. Because your principles have consequences. The gavel struck once. The sound echoed like the closing of a vault door. As people filed out, Andrew remained seated. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his company, his cars, or his lawyers. He was thinking about the document on the judge's desk, one sheet of paper that refused to bend to his will. The courtroom froze. Judge Caprio lifted his eyes from the documents, and when he spoke again, his tone was no longer soft. It had turned crystalline, precise. Bring in the next witness, he said. No one expected another witness. The clerk opened the side door, and a young man stepped hesitantly inside, nervous, holding his cap in both hands. The nameplate on the record read, Lucas Bennett, driver's assistant. A murmur ran through the gallery. Caprio gestured toward the stand. Mr. Bennett, please come forward. Andrew Marston's jaw tightened. This is unnecessary. That boy works for me. He knows nothing about that morning. Then you shouldn't worry, Caprio replied. Lucas took his seat. His voice, when it came, was thin but steady. Mr. Marston asked me to take the blame, he said. He said it'd be easier that way. He promised me a raise. I couldn't say no. My little girl's in the hospital. A wave of outrage rolled through the room. Someone gasped. Another muttered, unbelievable. Cameras clicked despite the bailiff's warning. Caprio raised his hand for silence, but the tension stayed, vibrating in the air. Marston's face flushed a deep, furious red. He's lying. He's looking for sympathy. I pay him more than he's worth. Caprio's voice cut clean through the noise. And that makes you morally right, Mr. Marston? Andrew sneered. It makes me effective. The judge closed his file. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a deliberate motion, he reached forward and switched off the microphone. The sudden absence of sound was deafening. Do you know why I stopped the recording? He asked quietly. Because right now, we're outside the law's domain. This isn't about statutes, it's about being human. Even without the mic, every word carried. Caprio leaned forward. You believe efficiency replaces empathy. You've spent years mistaking control for character. But let me tell you something, Mr. Marston. Power without compassion isn't strength. It's decay. Andrew opened his mouth, then closed it again. The edge of arrogance wavered in his voice when he finally said, You don't know me. I know your type, Caprio said. I met one once long ago. He told me that money could buy respect. He died alone. The judge paused, his eyes steady. You remind me of him. The words landed like stones in still water, quiet, but each ripple seemed to reach every corner of the room. No one dared speak. Even the air seemed reluctant to move. Caprio turned to Lucas. You may step down, son. Lucas nodded, visibly shaken. Before he left, he looked once at Marston. No hatred, just a kind of sorrow. Marston's composure faltered for a heartbeat. His fingers twitched against the polished wood of the table. For the first time, his voice carried something unguarded. A tremor, small but real. Judge, you're making a spectacle out of sentiment. Caprio replaced the microphone and said calmly, No, Mr. Marston. I'm holding up a mirror. Whether you look into it, that's your choice. He tapped his pen once against the bench, signaling the recess. The sound echoed across the silent room. And for the first time since the trial began, Andrew Marston didn't stand up immediately. He stayed seated, staring at nothing, as if realizing that for all his wealth, he had never actually owned a single moment of humility. When the court reconvened, the tension felt heavier, almost sacred. This was no longer a hearing, it was an unmasking. Judge Caprio reopened the folder before him, but his tone had shifted again. It wasn't sharp now, only deliberate. We are not returning to the question of speeding, he said. We're returning to the question of truth. He nodded to the clerk. Show me the payment record for the fine. The clerk brought a printed statement. Caprio studied it, then looked up at Marston. Interesting. The citation was paid before this hearing even began. And the payment didn't come from your personal account. It came from a corporate ledger. Care to explain why? Andrew hesitated. It's all the same money, Judge. My company, my responsibility. No, Caprio said. It's not the same. Responsibility isn't transferable. You even outsourced your own remorse. The words landed hard, clean. A few people in the gallery murmured. Before the next question came, the door opened. An older woman entered, gray hair pinned back neatly, carrying a thin folder of hospital bills. The bailiff guided her forward. Who is this? Caprio asked. She's my mother, Lucas said quietly from the back row. The woman's voice trembled, but her words were steady. My son works for Mr. Marston. 16 hours a day, sometimes more. I told him to quit, but he said, Mom, he needs me. And I need this job. My little girl's sick. She held up the bills, shaking slightly. I don't want pity. I just want you to know, he wasn't lying. I saw him cry that night. The room went utterly still. Even the air felt slower. Marston didn't look up. His eyes fixed on the table, jaw rigid. For the first time, his confidence looked like armor too heavy to carry. Caprio spoke softly. Mrs. Bennett, thank you. He turned back to Andrew. Now I understand why this case found its way here. This isn't about money. It's about what happens when decency becomes optional. Andrew's silence stretched. Somewhere near the back, a quiet amen broke the stillness. Caprio folded his hands. Mr. Marston, you're guilty of more than a traffic violation. You're guilty of moral negligence. But I'll give you one more chance. Tell this court what the word care means to you. The challenge hung in the air. Andrew's throat moved, but no sound came. His hands twitched once, and he finally said, low and hoarse, care is keeping things under control. Caprio shook his head. No, care is what you show when control no longer benefits you. A ripple of emotion moved through the gallery. Some nodded, others simply watched him in silence. The judge leaned back slightly. Here's my ruling for now, he said. You are guilty, but sentencing will wait until tomorrow. I want to see if you can find the difference between accountability and regret. He tapped his gavel lightly once, almost gently. Because this court can't change who you are, Mr. Marston. Only you can. As he stood, the sound of shuffling feet filled the room, subdued and thoughtful. Andrew remained seated again, his reflection caught in the polished surface of the table. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't look like a man in control. He looked like a man realizing that all his control had bought him nothing that mattered. For the first time since the trial began, Andrew Marston said nothing. And that silence, raw, unguarded, rang louder than any speech he had ever given. The courtroom waited. Caprio didn't press. He simply watched the man across from him, the way a teacher studies a student finally arriving at his own realization. Then, at last, Andrew spoke, not in defense, not in anger. Just a quiet confession that felt like the cracking of marble. I just wanted people to fear me, he said. Because when people fear you, they don't leave. The room seemed to stop breathing. Even Caprio's gavel hand froze midair. When he answered, his tone carried the gentleness of truth, not triumph. They don't leave, Mr. Marston. They run. There's a difference. A shiver ran through the spectators. The man who had entered the court boasting of wealth now sat small in his chair, hands clasped as if he were holding on to what little of himself remained. Caprio opened the folder once more, but didn't read from it. You see, fear builds walls. Compassion builds bridges. And the higher you stack those walls, the smaller your world becomes. Until one day, you realize you've built yourself into a prison. He leaned forward. Today, you'll pay a fine. Not to the state, but to the people who carried the weight of your indifference. He paused for effect, eyes never leaving Marston's. $50,000. It will go to a fund for the children of your employees, those whose parents work double shifts so you can never be inconvenienced. It's time you repaid a debt that can't be written off. The words landed like a gavel strike before the real one. Andrew nodded slowly. His voice was barely audible. I'll do it. The judge inclined his head. Good. Because justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. You can't erase what you've done, but you can decide what kind of man leaves this courtroom. A murmur swept through the crowd, half disbelief, half admiration. Then, unexpectedly, they began to applaud. It wasn't loud, but it was the sound of something shifting, Respect earned the hard way. Andrew turned slightly, eyes searching for Lucas in the back. The young man hesitated, then stood. Their gazes met, employer and employee, power and humility. Andrew walked toward him, step by deliberate step. When he finally stopped in front of Lucas, his voice trembled. "I'm sorry," he said. "And if your daughter still needs help, it's my responsibility now, not your burden." Lucas didn't reply. He only nodded, tears bright at the corners of his eyes. Caprio watched in silence. Then he spoke the final words, calm but resonant. "Justice," he said, "isn't the law's mirror, it's the soul's. And sometimes, mercy is what forces us to see our reflection." He reached for the gavel. The room fell still once more. "Court is adjourned," he said softly. "And remember, not every verdict ends in numbers. Some end in new hearts." The gavel struck once, sharp, final. As people rose, no one rushed for the exit. They moved quietly, as though unwilling to disturb what had just taken place. Andrew stood alone for a moment, looking down at his own reflection on the polished wood of the defendant's table. For the first time, it didn't look like a man untouchable. It looked like a man unfinished. Outside, reporters waited with cameras ready, but when he stepped through the doors, he didn't stop. No speeches, no gestures, just a single exhale into the cold air. Somewhere behind him, Lucas's mother whispered a prayer of thanks. And as the courthouse doors swung closed, the last sound that lingered wasn't the echo of wealth or guilt. It was the quiet hum of something new being born in the space where arrogance had finally run out of breath.